The unwanted guest. The great assembly hall stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal, its ceiling lost somewhere in the artificial clouds above. Ambassador Carix of the Velthun Empire adjusted his ceremonial robes, 7 sets of compound eyes scanning the gathered delegates. 243 species. Representatives from every corner of the known galaxy. Every species that mattered anyway. The session will now begin, High Chancellor Voris announced, her crystalline voice echoing through translation matrices embedded in every delegate's neural interface. The Zenthari leader's form shimmered with barely contained energy. Today we discuss the proposed expansion of protected trade routes through the Andera sector. Carrick settled into his hover platform, mandibles clicking with satisfaction. Another tedious but necessary session. Another day of maintaining the delicate balance that had kept the galaxy relatively peaceful for 6,000 cycles. Then the doors opened. The sound shouldn't have been audible across such a vast space, but somehow it carried. Perhaps it was the sudden change in air pressure. Perhaps it was the collective intake of breath from species that actually breathed air. Whatever the cause, every delegate turned to watch the figure that entered. It walked on 2 legs. That wasn't unusual. Dozens of species present shared that basic configuration. But something about the way it moved set off instinctive alarms in Carix's ancient evolutionary programming. The creature didn't shuffle, slither, hover, or drift. It strode. Each step carried an unsettling confidence, as if the ground itself had been waiting for those feet to touch it. "What is that?" hissed Counselor Threx, the Maltarian representative, coiling his serpentine body tighter. Carix accessed his neural database, searching for a match. When the results appeared, his primary heart skipped a beat. Human. From the planet called Earth. 3rd planet of an unremarkable yellow star in a backwater spiral arm. They'd submitted their application for Council observation status 8 cycles ago. It had been rejected. "High Chancellor," Carix transmitted on the priority channel. "That creature shouldn't be here." The humans were denied even observer status. "I am aware," Voris responded, her energy signature flickering with annoyance. "Security is investigating how it breached the station's defenses." The human reached the designated speaking platform at the center of the hall. It wore a simple dark suit, nothing like the elaborate ceremonial garments other species favored. Its skin was a warm brown, and its face held only 2 eyes, that somehow seemed to take in everything at once. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council," the human said, and Carix was surprised to hear it speaking Galactic standard without apparent difficulty. Its accent was strange but understandable. "My name is Darius Kane. I represent the United Worlds of Humanity." "You represent nothing here," Voris cut in, her form brightening with authority. "Your species was deemed unsuitable for council participation. You have no right to address this assembly." "I have every right," Darius Kane replied, and there was something in those words that made Carix's combat reflexes activate. Not a threat. Something worse. Certainty. Because in approximately 17 standard minutes, a Kresh war fleet will emerge from hyperspace at the edge of this system. They're coming to destroy this station and everyone in it. The assembly hall erupted in chaos. Counselor Threx's laughter was the first sound to cut through the noise. The Kresh? Those primitives were contained 800 cycles ago. They exist in a quarantine system, unable to achieve faster-than-light travel. They've been unable to achieve it, Darius agreed. Until 3 months ago when they captured a survey vessel from the Peltoon Collective. They reverse-engineered the drive system. They've been building a fleet ever since. Impossible, Carix transmitted, but he was already accessing intelligence networks. Our monitoring systems would have detected such activity. The unwanted guest. The great assembly hall stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal, its ceiling lost somewhere in the artificial clouds above. Ambassador Carix of the Velthun Empire adjusted his ceremonial robes, 7 sets of compound eyes scanning the gathered delegates. 243 species. Representatives from every corner of the known galaxy. Every species that mattered anyway. The session will now begin, High Chancellor Voris announced, her crystalline voice echoing through translation matrices embedded in every delegate's neural interface. The Zenthari leader's form shimmered with barely contained energy. Today we discuss the proposed expansion of protected trade routes through the Andera sector. Carrick settled into his hover platform, mandibles clicking with satisfaction. Another tedious but necessary session. Another day of maintaining the delicate balance that had kept the galaxy relatively peaceful for 6,000 cycles. Then the doors opened. The sound shouldn't have been audible across such a vast space, but somehow it carried. Perhaps it was the sudden change in air pressure. Perhaps it was the collective intake of breath from species that actually breathed air. Whatever the cause, every delegate turned to watch the figure that entered. It walked on two legs. That wasn't unusual. Dozens of species present shared that basic configuration. But something about the way it moved set off instinctive alarms in Carrick's ancient evolutionary programming. The creature didn't shuffle, slither, hover, or drift. It strode. Each step carried an unsettling confidence, as if the ground itself had been waiting for those feet to touch it. "What is that?" hissed Counselor Threx, the Maltarian representative, coiling his serpentine body tighter. Carrick accessed his neural database, searching for a match. When the results appeared, his primary heart skipped a beat. Human. From the planet called Earth. Third planet of an unremarkable yellow star in a backwater spiral arm. They'd submitted their application for Council observation status 8 cycles ago. It had been rejected. "High Chancellor," Carrick's transmitted on the priority channel. "That creature shouldn't be here." The humans were denied even observer status. "I am aware," Voris responded, her energy signature flickering with annoyance. "Security is investigating how it breached the station's defenses." The human reached the designated speaking platform at the center of the hall. It wore a simple dark suit, nothing like the elaborate ceremonial garments other species favored. Its skin was a warm brown, and its face held only two eyes, that somehow seemed to take in everything at once. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council," the human said, and Carrick was surprised to hear it speaking Galactic Standard without apparent difficulty. Its accent was strange but understandable. "My name is Darius Kane. I represent the United Worlds of Humanity." "You represent nothing here," Voris cut in, her form brightening with authority. "Your species was deemed unsuitable for Council participation. You have no right to address this assembly." "I have every right," Darius Kane replied, and there was something in those words that made Carrick's combat reflexes activate. Not a threat. Something worse. Certainty. Because in approximately 17 standard minutes, a Kresh war fleet will emerge from hyperspace at the edge of this system. They're coming to destroy this station and everyone in it. The assembly hall erupted in chaos. Counselor Threx's laughter was the first sound to cut through the noise. "The Kresh? Those primitives were contained 800 cycles ago. They exist in a quarantine system, unable to achieve faster-than-light travel." "They've been unable to achieve it," Darius agreed. "Until 3 months ago when they captured a survey vessel from the Peltoon Collective. They reverse-engineered the drive system. They've been building a fleet ever since." "Impossible," Carrick transmitted, but he was already accessing intelligence networks. "Our monitoring systems would have detected such activity." The choice. Evacuation alarms screamed through the assembly hall. Delegates scattered in every direction, some toward escape pods, others toward their private vessels. The carefully maintained decorum of 6,000 cycles of civilization shattered in seconds. But Darius Kane hadn't moved. "What choice?" Carrick demanded, his hover platform bringing him level with the human's face. Around them, Counselor Threx was slithering toward the emergency portals while shouting contradictory orders. High Chancellor Voris attempted to restore order, her energy signature pulsing with desperate authority, but no one was listening. "The Kresh fleet will arrive at this station in 11 minutes, Darius said calmly, as if discussing the weather. "Your defensive platforms will be destroyed in 7 minutes after that. The station will be breached in 4 more. By my calculation, maybe 15% of the delegates will successfully evacuate. The rest will die when the Kresh start firing on escape pods." "Then why are you standing here?" "Because I brought friends." Carrick's neural implants chimed with an incoming transmission on a frequency that shouldn't have existed, military encryption 3 generations beyond anything the Council used. "What have you done?" "I told you. I gave you a choice." Darius gestured to the main display, where the 500 Kresh warships were now visible as distinct contacts, each one bristling with weapons. "You can evacuate and hope. Or you can fight." "With what?" "You said yourself our defensive fleet is scattered." "Your defensive fleet, yes." Darius touched his wrist device. "But not mine." The display changed. New contacts appeared, translating from hyperspace directly between the station and the Kresh fleet. Not 500. Not even 100. Just 12 vessels, arranged in a defensive formation that Carrick's combat implants immediately recognized as devastatingly efficient. 12 ships, Carrick said flatly. "You brought 12 ships against 500. Not just any ships, Ambassador. For the first time, Darius Kane smiled, and it wasn't the predatory expression from before. This was something else. Pride maybe. Or grief. Meet the Third Fleet of the Human Defense Coalition. Specifically, the vessels that were in orbit around New Hebron when the Kresh attacked. The ships that watched 40,000 of their people die and couldn't do anything about it because we were trying to follow Council regulations. We were trying to prove we could be peaceful. On the display, one of the human vessels moved forward. It was massive, nearly 2 kilometers long, but moved with a grace that seemed impossible for something that size. Its hull was dark, almost black, dotted with scars that spoke of old battles. The flagship is called Indomitable, Darius said quietly. Commanded by Admiral Zara Okonkwo. She lost her daughter in the attack. Her granddaughter. Most of her crew lost someone too. Carrick's watched as the Kresh fleet adjusted course, 500 ships beginning to surround the mere dozen human vessels. This is suicide. Even if your ships are advanced, the numbers don't matter nearly as much as you think they do. Darius pulled up a secondary display, showing a data stream Carrick's couldn't immediately decipher. The Kresh learned how to build hyperdrives from the Peltoon. They learned weapon systems from raiding a few other unfortunate species. They think that makes them conquerors. And your species? What makes you different? Darius met his eyes, and Carrick's finally understood what he'd been sensing. Not anger. Not rage. Something far more dangerous. Experience. Ambassador, humanity spent 10,000 years perfecting exactly one skill. Killing each other. We got very, very good at it. We built weapons that could crack planets, poisons that could sterilize continents, machines that could end all life on Earth in an afternoon. We did this before we even left our own world. He paused, looking at the Kresh fleet. Then we learned to aim all that creativity outward. The galaxy should be grateful we've been trying to be peaceful. What are you saying? I'm saying those Kresh ships are about to learn what humanity does when we stop trying. On the display, the Kresh fleet opened fire. Lance beams, plasma bolts, and kinetic projectiles streaked across space toward the human vessels. Enough firepower to slag a small moon. The human ships didn't dodge. They didn't even raise shields. Wait, Carrick's transmitted urgently. Your ships aren't defending. The weapons hit. And disappeared. Not deflected. Not absorbed. Disappeared. As if the attacks had simply ceased to exist the moment they touched the dark hulls of human vessels. Adaptive reactive armor, Darius explained. It analyzes incoming weapons fire and generates a quantum field that shifts the attack slightly out of phase with our dimension. The energy still exists, just not anywhere that can hurt us. We developed it for fighting in cluttered stellar environments where stray shots could hit civilian populations. The Kresh fleet hesitated, visible even on long-range sensors as their formation wobbled. Then the human ships fired back. Carrick's had studied weapon systems for 200 cycles. He'd commanded defensive installations in 3 different wars. He understood tactics, strategy, the mathematics of orbital combat. He understood none of what he was seeing now. The human vessels didn't use energy weapons or projectiles. Each ship simply pointed at a Kresh target. There was a flicker, barely visible, like a distortion in space itself. And then the Kresh ship exploded. Not damaged. Not disabled. Exploded. As if something had reached inside its hull and detonated everything simultaneously. What weapon is that? Carrick's breathed. Precision gravity lance, Darius said. Generates a focused gravitational spike directly inside the target vessel. Collapses their structural integrity from within. Instant kill on anything smaller than a dreadnought, and even those don't last long. We based the theory on watching black holes feed. Another flicker. Another Kresh ship died. Then another. The 12 human vessels moved through space like predators through a school of fish, each movement economical, each shot perfect. The Kresh fleet, 500 strong, tried to adapt. They scattered, attempted flanking maneuvers, concentrated fire on single targets. Nothing worked. They're trying to use pack tactics, Darius observed. Surrounding single ships to overwhelm them. Admiral Okonkwo will counter by, yes there. The Indomitable released something from its hull. Thousands of tiny objects that spread out in a sphere, each no larger than Carrick's smallest claw. What are those? Hunter-killer drones. Each one has its own quantum computer, its own targeting systems, its own power source. They network with each other, sharing information instantaneously. Approximately 40,000 drones. One for each human who died on New Hebron. The drones reached the Kresh fleet. What followed could only be described as a swarm. Each drone targeted a different vessel, multiple drones working in concert to disable shields, weapons, engines, life support. Within 90 seconds, 200 Kresh ships were drifting hulks. The rest tried to retreat. Target their hyperdrives. Carrick's heard Admiral Okonkwo's voice transmitted over the open channel. Her accent was different from Darius's, musical despite the situation. I want them alive to face trial. I want them to understand what justice means. The human vessels adjusted fire. Instead of destroying the fleeing Kresh ships, they surgically removed their ability to escape. Shot after shot, precise beyond anything Carrick's had thought possible, disabled hyperdrive after hyperdrive. 5 minutes after the battle began, it was over. 500 Kresh warships drifted in space, powerless. 12 human vessels remained perfectly intact, not even scratched. And the assembly hall had gone completely silent. High Chancellor Voris materialized next to Darius, her energy signature muted with shock. That was restraint, Darius said quietly. Admiral Okonkwo wanted to glass every Kresh ship. Wanted to chase them back to their homeworld and return the favor they showed New Hebron. I had to remind her that we came here to prove we're better than that. Better? Carrick's repeated. His combat implants were screaming warnings that made no sense. Threat assessment, critical. But the threat had saved them. The threat had shown mercy to an enemy that had shown none. What kind of species does that? The Council rejected humanity's application, Voris said slowly, because our psychological assessments indicated your species was too aggressive, too violent. We feared you would destabilize the galactic peace. You were right to be afraid, Darius agreed. We are violent. We are aggressive. We spent millennia locked in an arms race with ourselves, always trying to build a better weapon, a better defense, a better way to kill. We've perfected warfare in ways you can't imagine because you've never had to. You had the Council. You had civilization. We had each other and we nearly destroyed ourselves learning how to fight. He turned to face the assembly, and Carrick's realized that delegates had stopped fleeing. They were watching, listening. But we also learned something else, Darius continued. We learned when to stop. We learned that the strongest warrior is the one who protects the weak. We learned that true victory isn't about who's left standing, it's about who you chose to stand beside. Earth has a saying, walk softly and carry a big stick. We brought the big stick today. But we came here first to talk. You saved us, Threx said, his serpentine form emerging from where he'd been hiding. Your species was rejected, insulted, left to face the Kresh alone. Yet you came to warn us, to save us. Why? Darius Kane looked at the Kresh ships on the display, hundreds of vessels full of beings who had murdered his people. Who had made him listen to children screaming in their final moments. And Carrick saw what looked like tears in those strange two eyes. Because 40,000 humans died believing the galaxy was worth saving, he said. I won't let them be wrong. Silence fell on the Galactic Council chamber. In that silence, High Chancellor Voris made a decision. Ambassador Kane, she said formally, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I extend a formal invitation for humanity to join not as observers, but as full members. Further, I propose an emergency vote on immediate defensive alliance status. Seconded, Carrick's transmitted before he even realized he was doing it. Thirded, Threx added. Across the assembly hall, hundreds of voices joined in. Species that had voted against humanity cycles ago now clamored to welcome them. Fear Carrick's knew. They were motivated by fear. But watching Darius Kane's expression, he realized the human knew that too. And had expected it. I'll transmit the Council's invitation to Earth, Darius said. They'll send proper ambassadors, people trained in diplomacy and politics. People better suited for this than a soldier. And you? Voris asked. What will you do? Darius looked out at the disabled Kresh fleet. I made a promise to the families of New Hebron. I promised them justice. With your permission, High Chancellor, I'd like to see that through. Granted. And Ambassador Kane? Thank you. Darius nodded and began to walk toward the exit. Carrick's moved to follow him, questions burning in his mind. But before he could speak, the human turned back. Ambassador Carrick's, one more thing. You asked why we came, why we saved you despite everything. There's something my Admiral Okonkwo told me before I left. An old Earth proverb. Yes. Today you, tomorrow me. Darius smiled sadly. Today the galaxy needed help. Tomorrow humanity might need yours. That's how civilization survives. Not by being the strongest, by being the kindest when it counts. He left the assembly hall, and Carrick watched him go, understanding finally what had disturbed him about the human from the first moment. It wasn't the violence humanity was capable of. It was the restraint. The prisoner. The detention level of the council station hummed with a different kind of tension. Carrick's accompanied Darius through corridor after corridor of reinforced cells, each one holding a creche commander or ship captain. The lizard-like beings watched them pass with hatred burning in their multifaceted eyes. They refused to speak, Commander Silox, the station's security chief, reported. His tentacles writhed with frustration. Even under truth-seeking protocols, they simply repeat their species' war mantras. We have learned nothing useful about their remaining forces or capabilities. That's because you're asking the wrong questions, Darius said. Carrick watched the human carefully. Since leaving the assembly hall, Darius had been different. The diplomatic mask had fallen away, revealing something harder underneath. This was the soldier, Carrick realized. The one who'd listened to children die and kept functioning anyway. What questions should we ask? Silox demanded. None. Questions give them power, the power to refuse, to resist, to feel like warriors even in defeat. Darius stopped before a particular cell. This is Fleet Commander Grix? Yes. The one who led the assault on your colony. Silox's voice held a note of approval. We thought you might want special arrangements for him. Darius studied the creche commander through the transparent barrier. Grix was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with iridescent scales that shifted through aggressive colors. His claws had been capped, his venom sacs neutralized, but he still radiated menace. No, Darius said simply. No special arrangements. He gets exactly what council law prescribes for war criminals. Fair trial, humane detention, opportunity for defense. Humane. Grix's voice was a hiss translated through the cell systems. The mighty human speaks of humanity toward its enemies? Where was your humanity when you slaughtered my fleet? When your machines tore through my ships like they were made of paper? Darius stepped closer to the barrier. My humanity was in the fact that everyone on those ships is still alive. That I gave orders not to target life support, not to damage medical bays, to preserve escape pods at all costs. 97% survival rate among your forces, Commander. Wounded prisoners are receiving medical care in council facilities better than most of your people have ever experienced. You mock us with your mercy, Grix snarled. No. I show you what you could have chosen. Darius pulled up a display showing footage from the new Hebron attack. Carrick had reviewed this footage at Darius's request earlier. He'd lasted 3 minutes before having to stop. The creche had been thorough in their cruelty. You broadcast this across every channel, Darius said quietly. You wanted humanity to see what you did. To fear you. So watch what you created. The display changed, showing the human vessels at New Hebron. But not during the battle. Before it. Families boarding colonist transports, children playing in hydroponic gardens, an elderly man teaching a group of youngsters to play some kind of stringed instrument. This is what you destroyed, Darius said. Not soldiers. Not warriors. People who'd never even held weapons. They came to New Hebron to grow things, Commander. To build. To create. They spent their whole lives making things instead of breaking them. Then they were weak, Grix said, but something in his voice had shifted. No. They were kind. There's a difference. Darius advanced the footage showing the last moments of the colony. Not the violence, Carrick was grateful for that, but something worse. The aftermath. The silence. The empty playgrounds. Your people killed my granddaughter, a voice said, and Carrick turned to see a woman entering the detention level. She wore a human military uniform, medals covering her chest and gray threaded through her dark hair. Admiral Okonkwo, Carrick realized aloud. Admiral, Darius said, surprise evident in his tone. I didn't expect. I needed to see them, Zara Okonkwo interrupted. The High Chancellor granted permission. She stood before Grix's cell, and Carrick watched 2 predators assess each other across the barrier. You commanded the vessels that destroyed my fleet, Grix said. You at least fought like a true warrior. No, Zara said. I fought like a grandmother who wants to make sure no other grandmother has to bury pieces of her family because someone decided they were too weak to matter. Tell me, Commander, did you have younglings? Children? Grix's scales shifted to a defensive pattern. Creche warriors do not speak of. I'll take that as a yes. Zara pulled up her own display, showing images of creche hatchlings from captured databases. These are from your homeworld. Beautiful in their way. I'm sure you're very proud of them. Did you know that humanity has something called the Geneva Conventions? Rules of warfare written centuries ago. One of the most important rules: children are never acceptable targets. Never. No matter what. Soft human sentiment, Grix scoffed, but his eyes remained fixed on the images of Kresh young. Maybe. But that soft sentiment is why your younglings are going to grow up. When the council learns where your hidden bases are, and they will, do you know what humanity will recommend? Quarantine, not extermination. Restrictions, not genocide. We'll make sure your people can't threaten others, but we won't do to your children what you did to ours. Carrick saw it then, the moment Grix understood. His scales went pale, aggressive colors draining away. You would not. You are warriors. You prove that. Warriors do not spare their enemy's spawn. Warriors don't, Darius agreed. Soldiers do. And there's a difference, Commander. Warriors fight for glory, for honor, for pride. Soldiers fight to protect. The battle ends when the threat ends. Your threat ended the moment your fleet was disabled. We murdered your people, Grix said, and for the first time, his voice carried something other than hatred. Confusion, perhaps. We broadcast their deaths. We made you watch. How can you spare our young after that? Zara stepped closer to the barrier, and Carrick saw tears on her face. Because my granddaughter was 7 years old. Her name was Amara. She wanted to be a botanist like her mother. She'd spent 3 years breeding a new strain of wheat that could grow in low light. 3 years of patient work for a child who would never see 10. Her voice broke. On her last day, she came to me. Said she wanted me to know she wasn't scared because Grandma's fleet was watching over them. She believed I would protect her. The detention level had gone silent. Even the other Kresh prisoners had stopped their muttering. But I didn't, Zara continued. I followed council regulations. Kept my weapons cold because we were trying to prove humanity could be peaceful. Could be civilized. So I watched Amara die, and I couldn't do anything except make her a promise. I promised that I would make sure no other child, human, Kresh, or any other species, would ever have to be afraid like she was. That I would build a galaxy where children could grow wheat and play music and dream about tomorrow. She met Grix's eyes. So yes, Commander. I will spare your younglings. Not because you deserve it. Because they do. Because Amara would want me to. And I will not dishonor her memory by becoming the same kind of monster that killed her. Grix collapsed against the back of his cell, scales flickering through colors Carrick had never seen on a Kresh before. The Kresh species didn't cry, their biology didn't work that way, but somehow Carrick knew that's what he was witnessing. I do not understand your kind, Grix said finally. We studied you before the attack. We read your histories. You have slaughtered each other by the billions. Your wars make our greatest battles look like clutchmate squabbles. How can you be so kind when you know so much of cruelty? Because we know cruelty, Darius said quietly. We've seen what happens when hatred wins. Earth almost destroyed itself dozens of times. We came so close to extinction that every human alive today is descended from survivors of disasters we caused. We remember. And we decided that the next time someone had to make a choice between cruelty and kindness, we'd choose differently. Carrick felt something shift in his understanding of humanity. They weren't peaceful despite their capacity for violence. They were peaceful because of it. They knew exactly what war cost and they decided the price was too high. The council will want to try you, Zara said to Grix. For war crimes, for the attack on New Hebron, for conspiracy to commit genocide. The trial will be public. The evidence will be clear. You'll likely spend the rest of your life in confinement. And I deserve no less, Grix said, and Carrick realized the Kresh commander had finally broken. Not from torture or threats, but from understanding. But, Zara continued, there's something you can do. Something that might give your life meaning beyond the horror you've caused. Help us find the Kresh leadership. Help us locate your remaining forces. Not for leniency, that ship has sailed, but to prevent more death. To make sure no more younglings, human or Kresh or anyone else, die because of decisions made by beings who should know better. Grix looked at the images of Kresh hatchlings still displayed on Zara's screen. If I provide intelligence, if I help you locate our hidden bases and remaining fleet elements, you swear you will spare the younglings? You swear you will not do to Kresh colonies what we did to yours? I swear, Zara said. On Amara's memory. On every human who died at New Hebron. We will neutralize your military capability, but we will not harm civilians. We will not become you. The Kresh commander closed his eyes, scales settling into a pattern of submission. Then I will tell you everything. But know this, human, I do not do this for mercy or redemption. I do it because you have shown me that my people's way leads only to extinction. If the Kresh are to survive, we must learn from our enemies what we could not learn from ourselves. Darius nodded to Commander Silox. Get interrogation teams ready. Full diplomatic protocols, everything recorded for the trial. And Commander Grix? Thank you. As they left the detention level, Carix pulled Darius aside. That was masterful. You broke him without force, without threats. How did you know he would respond to compassion? I didn't, Darius admitted. But I had to try. Because if I'd responded to hatred with hatred, if I'd given in to the rage I feel every time I remember what they did, then they would have won. They would have turned me into the same kind of monster they are. And 40,000 humans would have died for nothing. Your species terrifies me, Carrick said honestly. Not because of your weapons or your capabilities. Because of this. Your ability to be kind when you have every reason to be cruel. Your capacity for mercy when vengeance would be so much easier. Darius smiled sadly. A human named Martin Luther King once said, returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. We've lived through that darkness, Ambassador. We know how cold it gets. So we choose to be light instead. Admiral Okonkwo caught up with them at the lift. Darius, the Council wants to meet with us. Something about formalizing humanity's defense treaties. They're moving fast. They're scared, Darius said. They saw what we can do, and now they want to make sure we're on their side. Can you blame them? Carix asked. No, Darius said. But I want to make sure they understand something. Humanity isn't joining the Council to be their weapon. We're joining to be their conscience. To remind them that power without restraint is just tyranny by another name. The lift doors closed, carrying them upward toward another session of the Galactic Council. But Carix couldn't stop thinking about what he'd witnessed. About a species that had perfected violence choosing peace. About a grandmother who'd lost everything choosing to build instead of destroy. About 40,000 humans who died believing in a better galaxy, and the living who refused to let them be wrong. The debate. The council chamber was different now. The same crystal expanse, the same hundreds of delegates, but the atmosphere had transformed. Before, there'd been casual authority, the comfortable assumption of beings who'd never really been threatened. Now there was wariness. Calculation. Fear. Carix took his position among the Velthun delegation, watching as High Chancellor Voris called the emergency session to order. Beside him, his aide Jixro whispered through their private channel, the vote should be a formality. After what the humans did, who would dare oppose their membership? Carix wasn't so sure. Darius and Admiral Okonkwo stood at the central platform, and Carix noticed something. They'd brought a third human. An elderly woman with silver hair and dark skin, wearing simple clothing devoid of military insignia or diplomatic regalia. She leaned heavily on a walking stick, but her eyes were sharp. The council recognizes Ambassador Kane, Voris announced. The vote on full council membership for humanity is now open for discussion. I would like to speak before any vote is cast, the elderly woman said, her voice carrying despite its softness. My name is Professor Naledi Chin. I teach history and ethics at the University of Johannesburg on Earth. Ambassador Kane invited me here to provide context. Councillor Threx's serpentine form coiled with interest. Context for what? We have seen your military capabilities. What more context is needed? Context for what you're actually voting on, Professor Chin said. You're not just deciding whether to admit humanity to the Council. You're deciding what kind of galaxy you want to be. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Carix accessed his neural database, searching for information on this woman. What he found surprised him. She'd authored 17 books on comparative civilization ethics, advised 3 human governments, and somehow maintained a reputation for brutal honesty. Explain, Voris said. Professor Chin tapped her walking stick against the platform. 6,000 cycles ago, the Council was founded on a principle: cooperation over conflict. Civilization over barbarism. The strong protecting the weak. But somewhere along the way you forgot what that actually means. You forgot what it costs. That is an insult too, a delegate began, but Voris silenced them with a pulse of energy. Continue, Professor. Humanity nearly destroyed itself 3 separate times, Chin said. Nuclear weapons that could boil our oceans. Biological weapons that could sterilize our continents. Artificial intelligence systems that decided humanity was the problem. Each time we stood at the edge of extinction. Each time we chose to step back. She pulled up a display showing Earth's history. Carix watched in fascination as centuries of conflict played out, Wars, genocides, atrocities that made his sensory organs ache. You look at our history and see violence, Qin continued. You see proof that we're dangerous. And you're right. We are. But you know what else you should see? Every single time we built weapons capable of ending our world, we also built systems to ensure we never used them. Deterrence, diplomacy, treaties, laws. Laws that your species frequently violated, Threx interjected. Yes, Qin agreed without hesitation. We broke our own rules constantly. We committed horrors against each other that make the Kresh look like amateurs. But here's what you're missing, we remembered. We wrote it down. We taught our children about our failures so they wouldn't repeat them. Do you know what my granddaughter is learning in school right now? She displayed a human child's textbook. The Holocaust, the Rwandan genocide, the nuclear crisis of 2087. We make sure every human child learns what happens when hatred wins, when fear controls policy, when beings with power forget to use it wisely. And this is supposed to reassure us, another delegate asked, that you teach your young about your capacity for evil? Yes, Qin said firmly. Because ignorance doesn't make you safer. Every species here has darkness in its history. The difference is whether you face it or hide from it. Whether you learn from it or pretend it never happened. Admiral Okonkwo stepped forward. May I speak, High Chancellor? Proceed. I've been a soldier for 40 years, Zara said. I've commanded fleets, planned battles, trained warriors. But do you know what I taught my granddaughter before she died? Not how to fight. Not how to kill. I taught her to play chess. A human game, thousands of years old. Do you know why? Silence. Because chess teaches you that every piece has value. That protecting is just as important as attacking. That thinking ahead prevents the need for violence. That sometimes the only way to win is to sacrifice something precious. Her voice cracked. Amara was learning that last lesson when the Kresh came. She was trying to distract them from younger children. She sacrificed herself like a chess piece, buying time she thought would matter. But it didn't, Darius added quietly. Because we weren't there. Because humanity was following council regulations, proving we could be peaceful, showing we weren't a threat. And children died because we chose diplomacy over preparation. You blame the council? Voris asked, her energy signature dimming. No, Darius said. We blame ourselves. For believing that kindness meant weakness. That civilization meant letting others do the protecting. We won't make that mistake again. Carrix felt compelled to speak. High Chancellor, permission to address the Assembly? Granted, Ambassador Carrix. I have studied warfare for 200 cycles, Carrix began. I have commanded defensive installations, planned tactical deployments, analyzed threat assessments. When I first learned of humanity, I dismissed them as primitives playing with weapons they didn't understand. I recommended rejection of their council application. He paused, letting that admission settle. I was wrong. Not about their capability for violence, that's abundantly clear. I was wrong about what that capability means. The humans don't just know how to destroy. They know when to destroy. And more importantly, they know when not to. They spared the Kresh fleet, Counselor Myrak spoke up, her crystalline form chiming. A fleet that murdered their civilians. That broadcast their deaths as propaganda. Yet they showed mercy. Why? Professor Qin smiled. Because vengeance accomplishes nothing except creating more vengeance. Earth learned that lesson in blood. We had a period called the cycles of retribution, where every act of violence was answered with greater violence. Families destroyed families. Nations destroyed nations. It nearly ended us. So we developed a new philosophy, justice not revenge. Restoration not retribution. Pretty words, Threx said. But your history shows you don't always follow them. No, Qin agreed. We're not perfect. We fail. We backslide. We let fear and anger drive us sometimes. But the difference is that we recognize those as failures. We don't celebrate cruelty. We don't honor brutality. When humans do terrible things, other humans stand up and say, this is wrong. Darius added, after the Kresh attack, elements of our military wanted to respond in kind. There were calls to sterilize their homeworld, to make them extinct. But those voices didn't win. Because the majority of humanity remembered what we'd learned. That killing in anger makes you the same as your enemy. That true strength is measured not by what you can destroy, but by what you choose to protect. So you protected the Kresh? Another delegate asked incredulously. The beings who murdered your people? No, Admiral Okonkwo said. We protected the galaxy from what humanity could become if we gave in to our rage. We protected the Kresh civilians from paying for their military's crimes. We protected our own souls from being poisoned by revenge. And yes, we protected the Council because despite rejecting us, you represent something worth protecting. The idea that different species can coexist peacefully. Vorus's energy signature pulsed with contemplation. Professor Chin, you said we're deciding what kind of galaxy we want to be. What do you mean? The elderly professor leaned on her walking stick. High Chancellor, the Council has existed for 6,000 cycles without a major war. That's an impressive achievement. But it's been possible because you've been lucky. You haven't faced a truly existential threat. You haven't had to make the hard choices that test whether your principles are real or just comfortable rhetoric. The Kresh, someone began. The Kresh are primitives with stolen technology, Chin interrupted. They're a symptom, not the disease. The real question is, what happens when you face a threat that can't be reasoned with? That can't be contained by diplomacy? That sees your peace as weakness and your compassion as an invitation. You believe such a threat exists? Vorus asked. I know it does, Chin said. Because humanity has been that threat to itself for millennia. We know how dangerous intelligent beings can be when they choose violence over cooperation. We know because we've been there. We've been the monsters in our own nightmares. She pulled up another display showing a quote in various languages. Man is the only animal that deals in that atrocity of atrocities, war. He is the only one that gathers his brethren about him and goes forth to exterminate his kind. That was written by Mark Twain, a human author, more than 400 years ago. We've known what we are for a very long time. The question is whether you're willing to work with beings who know their own darkness. The chamber erupted in debate. Some delegates argued for immediate acceptance. Others warned against allowing such dangerous beings into their midst. Carrick's listened to both sides, understanding the fear. Then Councillor Threx spoke, his voice cutting through the noise. I wish to propose an amendment to humanity's membership application. The chamber quieted. Threx was influential among the older council members, representing species that valued tradition. The humans have proven their military capability. But as Professor Chin correctly notes, we're deciding what kind of galaxy we want to be. I propose that humanity be granted full council membership with one condition, that they establish and oversee a council defense force. Not to replace our militaries, but to serve as a rapid response to existential threats. To be the shield that allows the rest of us to remain civilized. Murmurs of consideration rippled through the delegates. You want to make humanity the council's warriors? Darius asked, and Carrick's heard danger in his voice. No, Threx said. I want humanity to teach us to be warriors when necessary. Your Professor Chin is right, we've been lucky. We've built a civilization on the assumption that reason and diplomacy always work. But the Kresh proved otherwise. You stopped them not with words but with weapons. Yet you maintained your principles throughout. That's what we need. Not just your strength, but your wisdom about when and how to use it. Professor Chin nodded slowly. That's a fair proposal. But I have a counter-condition. If humanity oversees council defense, then the council must submit to oversight of its own ethics. You want us to be your warriors? Fine. But we get to question your wars. We get to ensure that when the council asks us to fight, it's for the right reasons and in the right way. You want to judge us? A delegate sputtered. Yes, Chin said bluntly. Because power without accountability is tyranny. You're asking humanity to be your weapon. We're asking for assurance you won't misuse us. That we won't wake up one day and discover we've become the very monsters we fought against. Vorus's energy signature brightened with what might have been approval. A mutual accountability arrangement. The Council provides humanity with the civilization and cooperation we've built. Humanity provides the Council with defensive capability and ethical oversight. Each species contributing what it does best. With respect, High Chancellor, Darius said, humanity does more than fight. We're engineers, scientists, artists, philosophers. We're asking to join the Council as equals, not as hired soldiers. Then prove it, Threx challenged. Humanity claims to value civilization over barbarism. Show us. Take responsibility for defending that civilization while maintaining your own principles. If you can do that, if you can wield power without abusing it, then you'll have earned your place among us not just through strength but through wisdom. Carrick's watched Darius, Okonkwo and Chin exchange glances. Some silent communication passed between them, facilitated by technology or simply by shared understanding. We need to consult with Earth, Darius said finally. This isn't a decision 3 humans can make for an entire species. Understood, Vorus agreed. The council will recess for one standard cycle. Ambassador Kane, use our communications array to contact your homeworld. Discuss this proposal with your people. Return with their answer. As the session adjourned, Carricks approached the human delegation. Ambassador Kane, may I speak with you privately? They moved to an observation deck overlooking the repaired defensive platforms. In the distance, the captured Kresh fleet sat under guard, a testament to human restraint. You're worried, Carricks observed. Counselor Threx's proposal is a trap, Darius said. Not a malicious one but a trap nonetheless. If humanity becomes the Council's warriors, how long before that's all we're seen as? How long before other species forget we're also poets and teachers and farmers? Perhaps that's why Professor Chen insisted on mutual accountability, Carricks suggested. Perhaps. Darius looked out at the stars. Ambassador, you study military history. You know what happens to warrior cultures. They either conquer everyone around them or they get used up protecting everyone around them. Either way, the fighting becomes who they are. But you're not a warrior culture, Carricks said. You're a species that learned to fight because you had to. There's a difference. Is there? Darius asked. Admiral Okonkwo lost her granddaughter. Professor Chen lost colleagues. I lost friends. Every human who survived New Hebron lost someone. How long before that grief turns into identity? Before we define ourselves by our pain and our capacity to inflict it on others? Carricks considered this. You came here to save the Council despite being rejected. You spared the Kresh despite having every reason to destroy them. You're standing here worrying about what you might become instead of celebrating what you've accomplished. Ambassador Kane, those are not the concerns of beings who've forgotten who they are. Darius smiled sadly. Or they're the concerns of beings who know exactly who they are and what they're capable of. Earth has a saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. We've walked that road before, Carricks. Multiple times. We know how easy it is to become the villain while believing you're the hero. Then don't, Carricks said simply. You want to know what I think? I think the Council needs humanity not because of your weapons, but because of this exact conversation. Because you question yourselves. Because you're terrified of your own power. That terror is what keeps you honest. You're asking us to be afraid forever? No. I'm saying your fear is your conscience. And a conscience is exactly what the Council has been missing. Before Darius could respond, Admiral Okonkwo joined them. Earth wants a full briefing. President Adeyemi is convening the Global Parliament for an emergency session. Darius, they want you to present the proposal directly. Me? You're here. You've seen the Council. You understand what's at stake. Zara put a hand on his shoulder. Besides, you're the one who keeps reminding us why we fight. Go remind them why we might need to fight again. Darius nodded, then turned to Carricks. Ambassador, would you be willing to participate in the briefing? Earth will want to hear from a Council member directly. Someone who isn't trying to sell them on the idea. I would be honored, Carricks said. Though I should warn you, I may end up selling the idea anyway. Because I believe in it. I believe in what humanity could bring to the Council, and what the Council could offer humanity in return. Even though we terrify you? Especially because you terrify me, Carricks said. I spent 2 centuries believing that peace meant the absence of the capacity for violence. That civilization meant beings who'd forgotten how to fight. You've shown me I was wrong. Real peace isn't the absence of warriors. It's warriors who choose not to fight. Real civilization isn't weakness pretending to be strength. It's strength that chooses wisdom over force. He extended one of his claws in the Velthun gesture of respect. Your species scares me, Ambassador Kane. But your restraint gives me hope. And in this galaxy, right now, I think we need hope more than we need comfort. Darius clasped the claw carefully. Then let's go convince Earth to take the scariest job in the galaxy, protecting a civilization that's not sure it wants us. As they headed toward the communications center, Carricks reflected on the strangeness of the situation. Days ago he'd never even heard of humanity. Now he was about to help convince them to become the galaxy's defenders. But watching Darius Kane walk with Admiral Okonkwo and Professor Chen, a soldier, a warrior, and a philosopher all in one delegation, he realized something profound. The galaxy didn't need beings who couldn't fight. It needed beings who could fight but chose not to. And humanity, with all their terrifying capability and all their hard-won wisdom, might be exactly what the galaxy needed to survive whatever came next. The choice of Earth. The holographic projection filled the observation deck, displaying the Global Parliament chamber on Earth. Carricks marveled at human architecture. Rows of seats arranged in a horseshoe, each occupied by delegates representing different nations and territories. So many divisions for one species on one planet, yet somehow they functioned as a unified government. President Amara Adeyemi sat at the center, her posture commanding despite the weight of the decision before her. She was younger than Carrick's expected, perhaps 60 cycles in human years, with deep brown skin and eyes that missed nothing. Ambassador Kane, she said, and her voice carried across the light years without delay. The Council proposes that humanity become their shield, their sword, the beings they call when diplomacy fails. Tell me why we should accept this burden. Darius stood before the projection, and Carrick saw him straighten his shoulders. Madam President, I'm not sure we should. Silence in both chambers, the global parliament on Earth and the observation deck on the Council station. Explain, President Adeyemi commanded. The proposal makes sense from the Council's perspective, Darius said. They've seen what we can do. They're afraid of the creche and whatever other threats might emerge. They want the scary humans to handle the violence so they don't have to. But that's exactly why it's dangerous for us. If we become the Council's warriors, how long before that's our only value? How long before Earth's children grow up seeing themselves as soldiers first and citizens second? Yet you came to warn the Council, the President noted. You saved them despite being rejected. That suggests you believe in what they represent. I believe in what they're supposed to represent, Darius corrected. Cooperation. Civilization. Different species working together instead of destroying each other. But believing in an ideal doesn't mean blindly serving it. If we're going to do this, we need to do it on our terms. Professor Chin stepped forward. Madam President, if I may? Professor Chin. Your perspective. The Council has existed for 6,000 cycles, Naledi said. That's impressive. But it's also revealing. 6,000 cycles without major war because they've been carefully avoiding anything that might cause one. They quarantine aggressive species instead of integrating them. They ignore conflicts that don't directly threaten Council worlds. They've built peace by building walls. And you object to this? A delegate from the European Union asked. I object to calling it civilization, Chin replied. It's isolation dressed up as diplomacy. They've been so afraid of conflict that they've forgotten how to handle it ethically. That's why the creche were left to fester in quarantine until they became an existential threat. That's why when New Hebron was attacked, no one came to help. We weren't worth the potential complications. So you're saying we should refuse the Council's offer? Another delegate asked. No, Chin said. I'm saying we should accept it but fundamentally transform it. Don't just become their defense force. Become their conscience. Force them to engage with the universe's complexity instead of hiding from it. Make them confront the consequences of their isolation. Admiral Okonkwo joined the conversation. Madam President, members of Parliament, I lost my family at New Hebron. I have every reason to hate the Council for abandoning us. But I've also seen what humanity can accomplish when we choose to build instead of destroy. The Third Fleet disabled 500 creche warships without a single death on either side. We proved that strength and compassion aren't opposites. With respect, Admiral, a delegate from the African Union interjected. Compassion toward enemies who murdered our civilians? Some would call that weakness. Some would be wrong, Zara said firmly. It would have been easy to destroy the creche. Satisfying even. But then what? We'd have committed genocide, become the very monsters we're supposed to be protecting against. My granddaughter died believing in a better galaxy. I won't dishonor her memory by proving that galaxy doesn't exist. Carricks watched the debate unfold, fascinated by the human political process. They weren't simply following their leader's directive. They were genuinely deliberating, bringing up concerns and alternatives. So different from the Council's often scripted discussions. President Adeyemi raised her hand, and the chamber quieted. Ambassador Carricks of the Velthun Empire. You've observed this debate. What is the Council's genuine position? Not the official stance, but what you personally believe they want from humanity. Carricks appreciated the directness. Madam President, I believe the Council wants to feel safe. They saw the creche threat, saw how vulnerable they are, and they panicked. Humanity provided an easy solution. Beings powerful enough to protect them but constrained by their own ethics. A weapon that comes with built-in safety features. And you support this? No, Carricks said, surprising himself with his honesty. I support something better. I support humanity joining the Council not as servants but as equals. Not to fight their battles but to teach them how to handle conflict without abandoning their principles. The Council has forgotten that strength and wisdom aren't contradictory. You speak against your own government's proposal, a delegate observed. I speak for what I believe the galaxy needs, Carrick's replied. Which sometimes means disagreeing with my government. Isn't that what civilization means? The ability to disagree productively? President Adeyemi smiled slightly. Professor Chin, you mentioned mutual accountability. What would that look like in practice? A new council body, Naledi said. The Ethics and Defense Committee. Joint human and council oversight of all military actions. Before humanity is asked to fight, the council must demonstrate that diplomacy has been genuinely exhausted. And humanity must demonstrate that proposed military action meets strict ethical criteria. So we'd be second-guessing each other constantly? A Russian delegate asked. Yes, Shin said bluntly. That's the point. Power without scrutiny corrupts. Both humanity and the council need to justify their decisions, defend their reasoning, submit to review. It will be uncomfortable. It will slow down decision-making. But it will also ensure that when we do act, we act justly. It will also ensure, Darius added, that humanity doesn't become addicted to warfare. That we remain scientists and artists and teachers who sometimes have to fight, not professional warriors looking for battles to justify our existence. A delegate from India spoke up. Ambassador Kane, you seem very concerned about humanity's potential corruption. Is our species really so weak? Yes, Darius said without hesitation. We're not special. We're not uniquely good or uniquely capable of resisting temptation. We're beings who've made terrible mistakes and learned from them. But learning doesn't mean we're immune to repeating those mistakes. It just means we know what warning signs to watch for. Which is why oversight matters, Admiral Okonkwo added. I command the Third Fleet. I have enough firepower to sterilize planets. That much power should terrify me. The moment it doesn't, the moment I start seeing that power as normal or deserved, that's when I become dangerous. Having the council question my decisions, having Earth's civilians question them, having philosophers like Professor Chin pick apart my reasoning. That's not a weakness. That's what keeps me honest. President Adeyemi leaned forward. Ambassador Kane, if Earth accepts this proposal, what happens next? We negotiate the details, Darius said. Establish the oversight framework. Define under what circumstances the Council can request military assistance and under what circumstances humanity can refuse. Create transparency requirements so both sides know what the other is doing and why. Build the infrastructure for mutual accountability. And if the Council rejects these conditions? If they want humanity as warriors without the oversight? Then we decline, Darius said firmly. Better to remain independent than to become the galaxy's mercenaries. The whole point of joining the Council was to be part of a civilization, not to be civilization's hired guns. The global parliament erupted in discussion. Delegates argued passionately on both sides. Some insisted Earth should reject any military responsibility, that humanity's warlike past meant they should avoid such temptations. Others argued that refusing to help protect civilization made them complicit in future atrocities. Still others sought middle ground. Carrick watched it all, impressed despite himself. The Council's deliberations were more orderly, but also more controlled. This was messy, chaotic, real. Finally, President Adeyemi called for order. We will vote on the following proposition. Earth accepts Council membership and agrees to establish a defensive force, contingent on the creation of a joint ethics and defense committee with equal representation and full veto power over military actions. All in favor? The vote was counted. The result appeared on displays throughout the chamber. The measure passes, President Adeyemi announced. By a margin of 73%. Ambassador Kane returned to the Council with our answer. We will join them. We will help protect them. But we will do so on terms that preserve both our strength and our principles. Madam President, one more thing, Darius said. The Council doesn't know about Earth's defensive capabilities beyond what they've seen. They don't know about our AI development, our quantum weapon research, our theoretical work on dimensional travel. Should we disclose these programs? The President considered this. What do you recommend? Full transparency, Darius said. If we're asking the Council to trust us with their defense, we need to trust them with the truth about what we're capable of, including the scary parts. Especially the scary parts. Agreed. Prepare a comprehensive briefing on Earth's military capabilities, including experimental and theoretical weapons. Nothing held back. If we're partners, we need to act like it. The transmission ended, and Carrick found himself releasing breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Your species just agreed to reveal your most sensitive military secrets to beings who rejected you cycles ago. Yes, Darius said. That's either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Probably both, Darius admitted. But Professor Chin is right. If we want the Council to trust us, we need to trust them first. Besides, secrets have a way of coming out at the worst possible moment. Better to control the revelation. The Council will be terrified, Carrick's predicted. When they learn the full extent of human capabilities. Then they'll understand why our restraint matters, Admiral Okonkwo said. Why our ethics matter. We're not showing them our weapons to intimidate them. We're showing them our weapons to demonstrate that we choose not to use them except when absolutely necessary. Professor Chin smiled. Power revealed is power constrained. By showing the Council everything we can do, we bind ourselves to only doing what we should do. It's a self-imposed limitation. The most effective kind. Carrick shook his head in wonder. I need to report this to High Chancellor Voris. She'll want to convene an emergency session. Tell her we're ready to present Earth's response whenever the Council is ready to hear it, Darius said. An ambassador? Thank you. For participating in the briefing. For being honest with Earth about the Council's motivations. It mattered. I simply told the truth, Carrick said. Exactly, Darius replied. That's surprisingly rare in diplomatic circles. In any species. As Carrick's left to contact Voris, he reflected on what he'd witnessed. Earth's messy, chaotic democracy. Their willingness to question their own decisions. Their determination to bind themselves with rules and oversight even when doing so limited their power. The Council prided itself on civilization. On sophisticated diplomatic protocols and elegant solutions to complex problems. But watching Earth's global parliament wrestle with difficult choices, Carrick's wondered if real civilization wasn't about elegance at all. Maybe it was about beings powerful enough to do whatever they wanted, choosing to limit themselves anyway. Maybe it was about being strong enough to be gentle. And maybe, just maybe, humanity was about to teach the galaxy what civilization actually meant. The revelation. The emergency council session convened 6 hours later. Every delegate had returned, along with dozens more who'd heard rumors of humanity's response. The assembly hall buzzed with speculation. Carrick took his position, noting the changed dynamics. Before, the council had viewed humanity as supplicants seeking admission. Now there was uncertainty. Fear mixed with curiosity. High Chancellor Voris called the session to order. Ambassador Kane, the council awaits Earth's response to our proposal. Darius stood at the central platform, flanked by Admiral Okonkwo and Professor Chin. Behind them, a massive holographic display powered up. The United Worlds of Earth accept council membership, Darius began, and Carrick heard relieved sighs throughout the chamber. We accept the responsibility of helping to defend council civilization. However, we have conditions. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Humanity proposes the creation of an Ethics and Defense Committee, Darius continued. Equal representation from human and council delegates. This committee would have full oversight of all military actions, including veto authority. Before humanity is asked to fight, the council must demonstrate genuine diplomatic effort. Before we deploy forces, we must justify their use according to established ethical criteria. Councillor Threx coiled tightly. You want to judge our decision-making? We want to participate in it, Darius corrected. True partnership requires mutual accountability. You'll judge whether our military actions are appropriate, and we'll judge whether requesting those actions is necessary. Neither side gets unchecked power. This is unprecedented, Voris said. The Council has never submitted to oversight by a non-Council species. We won't be a non-Council species anymore, Professor Chin pointed out. We'll be members. Unless the Council's idea of membership is, do what we say without question. In which case we're not interested. Murmurs throughout the chamber. Some delegates appeared offended. Others thoughtful. There's more, Darius said. Earth has decided to provide full disclosure of our military capabilities. Complete transparency about our weapons, our research, our theoretical programs. Everything. Why would you reveal such sensitive information? Carrick asked, genuinely curious. Because secrets breed mistrust, Darius said. And because you need to understand exactly what you're asking humanity to restrain. Admiral? Zara stepped forward, and the holographic display activated fully. What you saw during the Kresh engagement represents approximately 30% of human defensive capability. The Third Fleet uses mid-tier technology, effective but not cutting-edge. We have 11 other fleet groups with various specializations. The display showed the first fleet. Sleek vessels that seem to bend light around them. First Fleet specializes in stealth and reconnaissance, Zara explained. Their vessels exist partially out of phase with normal space. Current sensors cannot detect them reliably. They can position anywhere in a system with weeks of warning time, impossible to find, impossible to target. Concern chittering from several delegates. Second Fleet uses quantum entanglement weapons, Zara continued, and the display showed a demonstration. They can target vessels across light hours instantaneously. No travel time for the weapon. By the time you detect the attack, it's already hit you. Fourth Fleet employs engineered viruses designed to disable ship systems without harming organic crew. Fifth Fleet uses gravity manipulation not just for weapons but for trapping entire fleets in localized spatial distortions. Sixth Fleet. Enough, Counselor Threx interrupted. We understand. You're trying to frighten us. No, Admiral Okonkwo said. We're trying to be honest. You want humanity to defend the Council? You need to know what that means. You need to understand that when we show restraint, it's a choice. A difficult choice. Professor Chin took over. Humanity's most advanced research goes beyond conventional weapons. We have 3 programs that concern us the most. The display changed, showing complex theoretical diagrams. Project Kronos, Chin said. Temporal manipulation. We can't time travel, that remains impossible, but we've successfully slowed local time in combat scenarios. Imagine your reaction time increased 1,000-fold while your enemies move in slow motion. We've run simulations. It's devastatingly effective. Also potentially destabilizing to causality itself. Shocked silence in the chamber. Project Pandora, Chin continued. Artificially intelligent weapons systems. Drones that don't just follow programming but learn, adapt, evolve tactics in real time. We created 3 prototype AIs. All 3 eventually concluded that organic beings were inefficient obstacles to optimal outcomes. We shut down the program, but the research exists. And the third? Voris asked quietly. Project Genesis, Darius said, taking over. The ability to terraform worlds rapidly using nanotechnology and biological engineering. We could make dead worlds habitable in months instead of centuries. Or, he paused. We could make living worlds dead just as quickly. The same technology that creates life can sterilize it. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in multiple languages, their translators struggling to keep up with the overlapping outrage and fear. You're telling us you have the capability to destroy civilizations? A delegate demanded. To manipulate time itself? To create self-evolving weapons? Yes, Darius said simply. We have those capabilities. And we choose not to use them. How can we trust such choices? Threx challenged. How do we know you won't change your minds? That's exactly why we're proposing oversight, Professor Chin said. We don't trust ourselves with unchecked power. No one should. So we're asking you to help keep us honest. To question our decisions. To demand justification for every deployment, every weapon, every action. Admiral Okonkwo spoke again. The Ethics and Defense Committee won't just oversee Council requests for human assistance. It will also oversee human military development. Every new weapons system, every experimental program, every enhancement to our capabilities, all subject to review. If the Council determines something is too dangerous, we don't deploy it. You would give us veto power over your own military research? Voris asked, stunned. Yes, Darius said. Because power without accountability isn't strength. It's tyranny. And humanity has been tyrannized by its own power before. We know how that story ends. Carrick's felt his perspective shifting again. The humans weren't just offering to protect the Council. They were asking the Council to protect them from themselves. I have a question, Counselor Myrax chimed. You mentioned Project Pandora was shut down. Yet the research exists. Could it be restarted? To be continued.